Hello. I would like to do a little short segment on the soul, or or whatever the soul actually is. I was raised in a Christian household, raised to be Christian, and I took a lot of classes in philosophy. That Christian philosophy, or medieval philosophy, or even ancient philosophy, that presumed or set the framework for Christian metaphysics of the soul. The soul is a very ingrained notion. It's given a lot of leverage, a lot of weight in conversation, just even regular conversation. The soul is generally presumed between two interlocutors. Well, it's given a lot of weight for something that probably doesn't exist and there's no evidence for. There's still some skepticism around it, but my general thoughts on the soul, and I guess I should say, like, the soul I would define as an immaterial principle unifying the person. Something beyond a physical form. A physical form, in an Aristotelian sense, I wouldn't call a soul. I would simply call it a physical form, and I think that there's a lot of reality to substantiate that. My general thoughts on the soul are that there's a lot of confusion going on about a lot of notions have been confused and conflated, such as the sense of personal dignity, the sense of continuance of the self has been conflated with the soul. And so I don't really think there is anything immaterial about a person, except maybe you could abstract or conceptualize the form in some immaterial way, but it would still be a form of the material that would correspond to the Aristotelian notion of the soul. I don't think there's a ghost, basically. And yet, I think that there's something odd about human consciousness that begs the question a little bit further. Usually human consciousness is invoked to prove the soul, or to question why you could construct a metaphysics without the soul. And there's something to it, and there's something that's not to it. Basically, I think the only arguments about the soul that remain are the mystery of human consciousness is somewhat persistent, but I don't think it points to an immaterial concept or an immaterial reality. I think it's a far more troubling and fundamentally awkward position to be put in when I think the reality of the situation is there really may not be such a thing as consciousness at all. Or I guess there may be such a thing as consciousness, but there may not actually be such a thing as an enduring person. And here's the kind of framework in which I find that notion to be, in which that notion arises. Imagine if you have someone in a coma, or someone lives their life and then they go into a coma, or they're frozen in a hyperbaric state, and at some point in the future medicine progresses to the point where we can reasonably bring them back, and we can restore their lives. We can restore their functions and their brain functions and their organs, and I think what that person would experience is, if we want to say it's the same person, I mean, imagine that this isn't like a 20-year period. Imagine this is a 10 or 100,000 year period that this person is frozen. Is it reasonable to say that this is the same human being 10,000 or 100,000 years later? In one sense, you could say so, because there's still a continuity of all of the atoms of that person. Then again, does the continuity principle hold that well, since you can be the same person despite all of your atoms changing over the course of your lifetime? I think, but just as a thought experiment, think of that person coming back from their 10,000 or 100,000 year nap, or freezing nap, and they think of themselves as sort of distantly remembering this previous life that they had, but still the same life, the same person. And in that case, you might be inclined to think, yes, it's the same person. It's the exact same person. Now imagine if you took a person at the moment of their death and scanned the location of every atom in their body and in their brains, and later you had a machine, 100,000 years later, construct a perfect replica of that person. They would have the same exact experience. They would have the same exact feeling of this distant previous life, and yet the same person. And I think in that case we would say, no, not the same person, a clone. There's a break, there's a discontinuity there, which is odd because the form is what's persisting there, and in the others it's the matter that's persisting. The frozen person, it's the matter that's persisting, and in the instance of the computer scan, it's the form that's persisting. And usually people are inclined to think of the form as, the form, the soul, as the human element. So, but I think that raises the question, are we really persistently the same person in any meaningful sense? Are we meaningfully unified to the people that